Five Nights at Freddy's is a name you might be familiar with. The original survival horror game was released back in 2014 and took the world by storm, spawning a myriad of sequels and spin-offs. But by far the most anticipated of all these projects would be the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, which was announced to be in development as far back as 2015. Now, what better company is there to produce animatronics for this movie than the Jim Henson company itself? It's something that's never crossed my mind up until now, but it's happening. So I was a fan of the Five Nights at Freddy's or FNAF franchise for quite some time. I was never really a horror fan, but I remember being gripped by this amazing narrative that was cleverly strung throughout the games. And this is why the prospect of a movie was always so exciting. But the film's production has been stopped and started and passed around so many times that it started to raise some red flags for me. Yes, on the one hand, it seemed like the game's creator, Scott Cawthon, cared a great deal about the quality of the final movie, but it got to a point where I began to think they're really struggling with faithfully turning this game into a movie. So is it really such a good idea after all? Something that caught my attention the other day, however, was the announcement that actual animatronics for the film were being developed in Jim Henson's Creature Shop. Now, since the Jim Henson Company sold off the rights to the Muppets to Disney in 2004, what was once the Muppet Workshop in New York became Jim Henson's Creature Shop. Nowadays, the New York branch specialises in the Muppet-style puppets, whilst it's the Los Angeles branch that creates the more realistic animatronic creatures and suits. When I was a kid, I always had like this phobia of these 6-foot-tall characters that seemed alive but weren't. It's what I come to know as Uncanny Valley, and was the reason FNAF resonated with me so much in later years. Like every other kid seemed to love these dressed up characters and stuff, but I was always like, mate, this is terrifying. So when everyone started shitting themselves at FNAF, I almost wanted to say, that's what it feels like. Anyway, I happened to check in on YouTuber Dorgo the other day, and he's like,
the same company who have made the Muppets are working with FNAF.
So I'm like, yeah, I should probably talk about this. If you look at the image itself, this was released both by the film's producer and Henson's Creature Shop, showing an employee working on a concept maquette for Freddy Fazbear. This is standard practice, and you see it with each and every dinosaur from the Jurassic movies, etc., to give an exact idea of what the final product will look like, so that any changes can be made before the full-size ones are produced. I can only imagine the parts are 3D printed, and you see Freddy's top hat and microphone there. But I've seen life-size recreations of these animatronics before, and they never look quite accurate to the game. Though in this instance, I can only hope Scott Cawthon supplied the original digital models, which definitely seems to be the case here. Then these could be modified and 3D printed as appropriate by Henson's Creature Shop. Obviously the final version should have that matted fur and everything. Can't wait to see that. I just really hope that they're true to the original designs. The other thing to note here is that we can see the costume is being built to be worn by a human, so this isn't an actual animatronic, which is funny since Henson's Creature Shop specialises in them. But I think from a filmmaking standpoint, it's going to be logistically a hell of a lot easier to direct a performer inside a suit than it would be to program an animatronic. Let's just hope it doesn't have a spring lock mechanism. I imagine at the joints and stuff, they could have either practical or some digital effects to show animatronic parts instead of, well, the human operator's arms and legs. Though it's also entirely possible that they make animatronic versions in addition to these, using different ones depending on the requirements of the scene. For example, running down a corridor just isn't possible for an actual functioning animatronic. So yeah, the Jim Henson Company's involvement in the movie is almost like an approval of quality, at least in terms of the practical effects. But as for the actual story, we'll have to wait and see. Like I mentioned earlier, the FNAF games have just kind of dwindled in quality ever since Scott Cawthon stepped back from the franchise, and it's unclear if he'll have much involvement in the film at all now. It's one of those franchises I'd describe as being fed to the children, as over the past few years we've went from the gritty, realistic tone of the earlier games to bright, colourful, plasticky animatronics that are clearly marketed more towards kids. What solidifies this for me are the replies of the aforementioned post, where we've got, "Are this going to be like human using the animatronic suit?" and "I'm so excited I saw it and I screamed of excitement, finally we wore something," and "Please show some up." It's for this reason I hope the film is actually hardcore horror, because even though I'm not a huge fan of the genre, it'd just be hilarious to see all the 6-year-olds finally get the message that this franchise was never intended for children. Anyway, what do you think of the Jim Henson Company's involvement in the FNAF movie? Were you ever a fan of the franchise, or is this the first you're hearing of it? Leave your thoughts down in the comments section below, and if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe for more content like this. Thanks for watching.